Memorial Day weekend 2026. You know, America has always been at its best when it's showing conviction, courage, and compassion. Memorial Day weekend is a privileged opportunity for all of us to remember America's fallen warriors. The fallen warriors who displayed that conviction, courage, and compassion while in combat. They gave their all in sacrifice and service. So perhaps the following story will help you with the sacred duty of honoring the fallen. So it was June 1944. An American pilot held his crippled B-24 in the air just long enough for 7 men to parachute to safety. And then his plane went into a power dive and crashed into an English farm. His body lay 20 feet underground for 79 years. You see, in 2023, they found him, and then they brought him home, and they buried him at Arlington National Cemetery. This is the story of William Montgomery. Hey, friends, this is Bruce at the Sentinel Broadcast. William Bailey Montgomery was born in 1919 in Ford City, Pennsylvania. Now, that's just a small steel town along the Allegheny River. Ordinary and yet extraordinary. William was a football star in high school, and then he proved to be a football star at Washington and Jefferson College. He was the captain of the football team and also the captain of the track team. He pledged Phi Kappa Psi fraternity. Remember that. That'll come into play a little later in the story. Now, after graduation in 1942, he enlisted in the United States Army Air Forces. He looked for and earned his pilot's wings and his lieutenant's bars. He was assigned to fly the B-24 Liberator, one of the main American heavy bombers of World War II. Now, by the spring of 1944, William had crossed the Atlantic, and he was stationed at RAF Halesworth in Suffolk, England. And he flew alongside other pilots. And they, as a team, were part of the 844th Bombardment Squadron, which was part of the 489th Bombardment Group, all part of the 8th Air Force. Now get this, young Lieutenant William Montgomery was just 24 years old when, on June 22nd, 1944, just 2 weeks after D-Day, Lieutenant Montgomery took off from Halesworth at the controls of a B-24H Liberator. He had 10 crewmen on board. Now, their target was a German airfield just outside of Paris, France. They were assigned to drop their bombs on the target. They did just that. They completed their task. But the enemy always has a say, and the German anti-aircraft fire tore through the bomber. The bomber's controls were badly damaged, and Montgomery was left with only one rudder and one elevator. The fuel system was also hit, and the aircraft began losing altitude quickly. But the young lieutenant maintained his composure. He had a choice. He could order his crew to bail out over occupied France. He knew that if that happened, that they would be either killed or captured. Or he could try to nurse that dying bomber across the English Channel and give his men a chance to parachute over friendly territory. Now, maintaining his confidence and his composure, he chose the Channel. Somehow he kept that Liberator in the air for the next 100 miles, over Paris, over Normandy, across the open water. And then finally, the English coast appeared ahead through the windscreen. He looked up to the heavens and he thanked God. And then he gave the order, prepare to bail out. 7 of his crew jumped clear and they parachuted to safety over the green farmland of West Sussex. Now, interestingly, 2 men stayed on the plane with Montgomery. They wanted to help him save the aircraft. One of those was his co-pilot, John Crowther, and then the other was his flight engineer, John Holoka. Well, that damaged B-24 finally went into its power dive. and then it crashed into open farmland near a village called Arundel. The impact created a huge crater, 20 feet deep. Ammunition cooked underground for several hours. Now, that night, a 9-year-old boy named John Seller was getting ready for bed at his family farm when he heard what he later described as a thunderous scream from the sky. But he went on to bed and woke up the next morning, slipping out of his room in the house, and found the crash site. He found very little debris on the surface, just dirt around the crater. Get this, he could still hear the ammunition exploding underground. Now, co-pilot Crowther's body was found just a few yards from the crash site. Montgomery and Holoka were 20 feet down in the earth with the wreckage of that B-24 bomber. Fast forward a bit, in May of 1950, the United States Army officially declared William Montgomery non-recoverable. And so what they did was typical, and that was to make sure his name was carved on the wall of the missing at the Cambridge American Cemetery in England. And so there his name was carved alongside thousands of other Americans who were never brought home. It's important to remember during this Memorial Day weekend. Now, Lieutenant William Montgomery stayed at that crash site 20 feet underground for 79 years. In 1974, a British aviation historian named Andy Saunders began investigating the crash. A local farm worker told him that in 1944, someone had picked up a bracelet that had the name Montgomery inscribed on it, and that was found near the wreckage. The bracelet was then lost, but Saunders kept searching and searching for decades. In 2012, he mentioned the case to an officer from the American Defense POW MIA accounting agency. The Americans then began their own investigation. Now, they had excavated the site in 2017, then they did again in 2019, but nothing definitive was found, even though they were digging deeper. But finally, in June of 2021, they dug deep enough, and they pulled fragments of bone, a preserved boot with bones inside, a single tooth, and a slightly bent Phi Kappa Psi fraternity ring out of the dirt, 20 feet underground. The ring was the only personal effect that they found. However, the DNA on the bones matched a relative back in Pennsylvania. On January the 10th, 2023, the Defense POW MIA accounting agency officially identified those remains of what they discovered as Lieutenant William Bailey Montgomery. And on September 13th, 2023, he was buried at Arlington National Cemetery and buried with full military honors. A 76-year-old man named William Montgomery, the lieutenant's nephew, received the folded American flag on that historic day. He had been named after the uncle that he had never met. So on this Memorial Day weekend, America, remember this, that the football star from Ford City who flew his bomber across the English Channel for his men is worth remembering. He stayed at the controls so that they might live. And then he came home 79 years later. His remembering and his service and sacrifice is worth our tribute. So remember this Memorial Day weekend and be encouraged that America at 250 years is still worth protecting, and its principles and values are worth preserving. God bless the families of our fallen warriors, and God bless their names. Until next time, Godspeed.